Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. Molly MacDonald is the founder of the Pink Fund, which provides financial assistance for women with breast cancer. Her story is one of riches to rags, from health to cancer. She's lost it all and come back. What empowers her? Come listen. This is an incredible story from an incredible woman. Molly, welcome to Bump in the Road. Now, if you would, let's start with your story.
Well, first of all, I just want to say something about bumps in the road, because I was thinking about that. So when we encounter a bump in the road, whether that's a big rock or a boulder or a tree limb that's fallen down, we have choices. So do we step over it? Do we kick it out of the way? Do we walk around it? Or do we try to ignore it? So I've had many bumps in my life, all in my adult life. I had what I call kind of a perfect childhood, at least in my recollection. But in 1982, I married a man I met on a blind date and blindly married him 9 weeks later. I had been an executive in the newspaper business and was experiencing at that period in the 80s what a lot of women were experiencing, which is a lot of sexual harassment. So for me, I thought getting married and having babies would just end all of that. And what I really traded one problem for another. So that marriage produced 5 beautiful children. And in the fall of 1997, I drove up the driveway to our multi-million-dollar home on 2 acres in the city of Bloomfield Hills with my 5 children, 4 to 13, strapped into the back of this big old gas-guzzling Suburban. And there was a small note on the door. And where we lived, notes weren't tacked on front doors. And so I pulled it off, and I read that the house was going to be auctioned off at a sheriff's sale in 30 days. And my husband had been involved in a deal. He believed that he was part of a scheme to bring money back into circulation in the United States that was taken from Jews and others during World War II, particularly in Switzerland, and that he had been selected basically to perform this job, and that he was going to get a percentage of all these billions of dollars that was coming back into the country. And what I didn't know, as I began to doubt the veracity of his deal, was that he was fronting this with our personal financial assets on the belief that we were going to be, in his words, wealthier than Bill Gates, which in 1997, Bill Gates had a net worth of $34 billion. So that night after I found the note on the door, we had an unpleasant conversation during which I learned that we were $15 million in the hole, that everything was at risk. And the irony was that I had had these dreams about 2 years prior to that all the money was gone. I would wake up in the middle of the night in a panic and thought, oh my God, what will I do? I have these 5 young children. I've been out of the workforce at that point 12 years. I was 46 years old. You know, what was I going to do? So in the quiet of the night, I basically in my head put together my exit strategy. And so when I found this note on the front door and had that unpleasant conversation with my husband, I was able to execute this plan that I had put in my head over the previous 2 years, which was sell a Steinway concert grand for cash, liquidate my IRAs from when I was employed, and pay the taxes on that, of course, cash in my whole life insurance policy, sell as much of my wardrobe as I could. And just to give you an idea, my daytime dresses in 1997 were about $2,500 each. But the irony of that was that I could only sell them for maybe $60 to $100. And that was a huge lesson to me in the value of my wardrobe, which was worthless. And then the other thing I did, I was able to cobble together about $125,000. So I hired 3 lawyers. I hired a bankruptcy lawyer to avoid personal bankruptcy, a divorce lawyer, and then I had to hire an IRS attorney because my name had been forged in their income tax, indebting me to the IRS for close to $1 million. So I had to do a workout with the IRS. So by the time I did all those things, I had about $60,000 left, and I rented a house for cash in a lovely Leave It to Beaver looking neighborhood about a mile and a half from the 3 public schools that my children could attend, as well as a mile and a half from the private school that they were attending, knowing that I was going to have to transition them into public school and wanting them to be from private to public school, wanting them to be in a great public school system, but living in, we live in Beverly Hills, which is not California, Michigan. But the taxes in Beverly Hills are lower than they were for the Birmingham school system. So that was all a win-win. So I moved these kids and we start this new life. And I call it the life. My one son one time said that every time we went out for dinner, he wanted to order surf and turf. And I would have to remind him that that was the old life. We're now in the fish and chips life. So we started transitioning from that. We had it all. We had, basically what most Americans believe will bring them happiness and joy, which is money, a big house, fancy cars, first-class vacations, beautiful clothes, jewelry, etc., and private education. So it's probably also important to know that my former husband was very well educated. He went to private school in high school, private boys' school, and then the University of Michigan, and then has a Harvard law degree. And fast forward to where he is today, he's homeless in Pontiac, Michigan. So it's 1997. I have this big bump in the road. I basically walked over it, kind of kicked it out of the way, and transitioned to this new life. And so I have to find a job. So here I am. I've been out of the workforce for 12 years, wiping butts and noses. I had a nanny in our former life. The kids were taking all kinds of classes and enjoyed a lot of everything that a privileged life brings. And we had none of that. So I had no child support, no alimony, and we were going through this divorce, which took 3 years because my former husband fought it on every point. And one of the interesting things is that here my former husband was involved in this charade, which it turned out to be a complete charade. He was taken for all the money and the other items that he bought for these people with our own finances, which included a Porsche and a Rolex watch, and it's the most bizarre thing. For somebody who was so intellectual, I mean, he had a high IQ, but clearly the greed colored his ability to be logical. So anyway, I try to get a job, and it's really hard. By this point, I have an aging mother and these 5 young kids, and 24 years ago, it was really hard. There was no flexibility in the workplace. So I had a series of jobs that didn't work out. And by 2004, I was about to really be able to have a position that was going to make it possible for us to get to live a decent life and not have to worry about paycheck to paycheck. We really lived paycheck to paycheck. And I know that's how most Americans live. And I have so much empathy for that stress that causes and really watching your money. I know one of the things that I'd like to share about that is that I wish I had not communicated to my children how stressed I was about money, because all of them have money fears now. So if anybody is going through something like this, where you've had sort of a change in your financial circumstances, you want to share with your children some of it, but not all of it, because I really think I created a lot of fear in them. So by the spring of 2005, I segued my professional career into sales. I had been told that I would always be great in sales, but I kind of frowned on that. I was like, well, I have a degree from the University of Michigan in journalism. I'm a professional. I'm not going to be in sales, but it turned out I was really good in sales. So I was working in large and grand format sales, which back then were huge building wraps, wrapping vehicles, creating marketing programs to bring out a new product or design element. And there was a company that was undercutting me. They had production out of Kentucky, and our production was in Detroit. So we were tied to a lot of labor laws here in Detroit. So I approached this company and said, I think you should hire me, make me a woman-owned division of your business, open a small office in Detroit, and we'll get all the business. So I had my annual mammogram, quit my job, and my mammogram comes back suspicious for breast cancer. So at that point, I had no family history of disease, never a lump or a bump, never any concerns. Then I have a biopsy, and it's Friday, April 1st, 2005. I'm in New York City. I flew out that morning to meet with Major League Baseball. The company that I was joining was on the short list to get the bid for all the graphics for the All-Star game that was going to be played in Detroit that July. So that was back then like a six-figure sale. And I felt so positive, like this is it. I'm going to be making good money. I have a company car. I'll have health insurance, and I'll be able to save a little. And when I got out to Metro Airport, I boarded this tram to get to the gate, and there was this beautiful woman on the tram, and she had on like a matching sheath dress and a coat that matched and went over that. And so I complimented her on her coat, and she said, well, I'm going to a breast cancer conference in Seattle. I'm an oncologist and I'm speaking. And I remember thinking, this is foreshadowing. I have breast cancer. So I meet with the vice president of marketing for Major League Baseball, big, beautiful Park Avenue office. And I leave, and I'm thinking, this is good. This is all great. I jump in a cab to get back to LaGuardia to go fly home to Detroit. And my cell phone rings. And at that time, it was a clam phone. And I pop it open, and it's my OBGYN delivering what for this year, for 43,000 women, will be a death sentence, and that I had breast cancer. So, of course, I didn't hear everything she said. All I heard was cancer. And I was shocked and devastated. And essentially, I had the very earliest stage of disease, which is called ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS. And while it was highly unlikely to take my life, it took my livelihood. So my career opportunity was derailed. And now I had a COBRA premium to maintain my health insurance of $1,300 a month. I had no savings, sporadic child support, no alimony, and unable to get a job. You really cannot go apply for a job and say, oh, by the way, I have to have some surgery and some treatment. And mine was 2 surgeries and radiation, which was every single day for 6 weeks. So nobody's going to hire you. And particularly 17 years ago, people weren't very sympathetic to a cancer diagnosis. Employers weren't. So it was kind of, a secret. So without my income and the addition of this COBRA premium, this home that I had rented for cash, and that my mother at 80 got a 30-year mortgage, and I was making the payments. I had to choose between the payments or the COBRA premium. I did not qualify for Medicaid at the time. This is obviously pre the Affordable Care Act, where if you have a change in circumstances, you can possibly qualify for Medicaid. And so this house goes into foreclosure. So now I'm in foreclosure for the second time. And at this point, I'm like, that's it. We're SOL. We're going to be homeless because I don't have a job. I still owe the IRS all this money. So I had that lien on my credit report. I don't have any way to rescue this situation. What am I going to do? And I went to the social worker at the hospital and asked her if there was any way that I could get some help. Could somebody make my COBRA premium or my house payment? She just looked at me with a blank stare. So I'm in treatment, radiation every single day. It was in a dark waiting room. I remember this, like, I don't know why the room was dark. Maybe it's because they wanted everybody to be quiet and contemplative. But it wasn't a bright, cheery room at all. And there was a TV that was on, and it had on all the talk shows, and primarily the ones where everybody was having more drama than I needed to add on to my own life. And there were a bunch of dog-eared magazines. And so after a few sessions, the same women would come in, at the same time we were all waiting. And they began to open up and share that they had this bump in the road too, that their breast cancer diagnosis had derailed their ability to work. They were actually experiencing really toxic physical, emotional, and mental side effects. And they were considering stopping treatment and going back to work, or selling their home, or pulling their kid home from college, or liquidating any retirement if they had that, and then paying the tax penalties. And at that point, I was like, if I can't get help, maybe I'm supposed to give help. And that one thought, that kind of complete 180 from trying to get help for me to give help to others when I couldn't really help myself, it was like being shot out of a cannon. I felt so energized and empowered, believing that I could make a difference, that I came home to my new husband, who, by the way, married me with all 5 children and a mildly demented mother. And he made some income. His income was not enough. He's a piano technician on the concert stage, very random business life, and that you never know when you're going to be hired and if the concert's going to be canceled and if they're going to choose somebody else. So while we had his income that helped stabilize us, that's what really helped us make the COBRA premium. We just couldn't make all the bills. So I came home to my husband and I said, I have this idea. By this point, when I had this idea, I'm now in line at the food bank in the basement of a church to help feed our family. And, that when I would tell people that I had this idea, they would look at me like, you're crazy. Like, you are really, I don't know what you're thinking, because you're in line at the food bank. What makes you think that you can help somebody else? And I just had this belief that I could do it. And I think that's kind of what you would call the secret sauce. In fact, there's a book called The Business of Belief, and there's a lot of data out there about what you believe, you achieve, and, thinking good thoughts. But I just thought I could do it. So we got a website donated. I had cast up my bust prior to my first surgery. And my husband casted in 32 pounds of dental stone, put a lucite dowel in it, and mounted it on a base. And then a friend of mine, a beautiful artist friend, painted it beautifully in 14 karat gold leaf and pink and white. And then she painted these beautiful battle ribbons across my chest. And we made a sign that said, "Bust Stop." And I started booking myself anywhere they needed a free speaker. So Kiwanis, Optimist Club, Rotary, women's groups, men's groups, church basements, synagogues, any place where they were looking for a speaker. And I would tell this sort of riches to rags to vision story. And then, because I had worked at the Detroit Free Press, the health writer there offered to do a front page story. So it was October 2006, and she did a front page story with pictures of me and the bust, and so that kind of launched us. And by the spring of 2007, we were giving out our first grants directly to patients' creditors. So we decided that we would pay these non-medical, non-negotiable bills. So in healthcare, you can often negotiate with your provider if you make a payment plan in writing and you maintain that as you agreed you would. Sometimes that doesn't work so well now, but it did work certainly for me, and we do advise people to do that. So we started, I formed a board of directors, which was basically my husband, my girlfriend, and I always say the dog because he would vote the way I wanted. But nobody believed I could do this, so nobody wanted to sit on the board. And my girlfriend who sat on the board had developed our heart and ribbon logo, for which I traded her an Eero Saarinen designed tulip table because I had no money. So with the logo, the donated website, the great story in the Free Press, then 27 newspapers picked this story up across the country because in 2005 there was still somewhat of a hard press business, and we were off and running. So
and you called it Molly's Fund, right?
No, I called it the Pink Fund.
The Pink Fund.
But I did have a bump in the road that I will share because sometimes people want what you develop and take it from you. And so when I first had this idea, I asked my breast surgeon, who's a great surgeon, and my girlfriend who lived around the corner, what do you think of this idea? And they were like, oh my gosh, this is an amazing idea. We're in. So I had a different name for the organization, and we got started. And within a year, they set a board of directors up, and they would not let me sit on the board. And that was a little bit of a red flag. I also had some concerns that the surgeon who was selling a vitamin supplement was going to be using some of the people that might come to our events to buy this supplement, and I felt like that would be a conflict of interest, and I expressed that to her. So it became apparent to me, I was actually told by one of the people on their board, look, why can't you just show up at these events, tell your story, and make people cry, and they'll give money. And you don't really need to run the organization. You need to really go get a job and take care of your family. And I was completely clueless that what they were trying to do was to get rid of me in a nice way. And when that didn't work, in August of 2006, I received a courier-delivered letter severing their relationship with me and telling me that I couldn't be part of the organization. And that was more stunning to me than driving up the driveway and finding my $2 million or $2.5 million house going to be auctioned off.
What was her rationale for that?
I think it was ego, and I think it was power. So she's a great surgeon. I have nothing bad to say about that, but I think she wanted this for herself. And I think I was going to get in the way. They wanted to use me for my story. I was a pretty compelling speaker. I would say, this is really interesting, I couldn't be a breast surgeon to save my soul. And I don't think she's a business person. So I'm a business person. I know how to run a business. But I think it was threatening. I think she needed to be the lead dog.
That's a shame. I mean, to mix essentially greed or desire for power with the idea of trying to actually help people.
Well, it shocked me because I thought in nonprofit that everybody was kind of had like a philanthropist, wanting to do good, but that is not really true. Nonprofits can be as dirty and nasty as for-profit businesses.
So what did you do?
So that's when I came home to well, first I mixed myself a big pitcher of Cosmos and I got drunk. I called my girlfriend who did the logo, and I'm sobbing. I mean, I'm just hysterical. And she thought somebody had died. I mean, I was never more shocked. Your surgeon, your physician's your surgeon takes an oath to do no harm, right? And I felt like she had stabbed me in the back. I mean, she cut out my breast, and now she stabbed me in the back. So I met with an attorney to find out if I had any remedies, which I did not, because I had not personally trademarked this. They wouldn't let me sit on the board, so I had no stake in any of it. And by Monday, my husband said, we're starting over. And he came up with the name, the Pink Fund. Breast cancer is pink, and it's a fund to help people. It's not a sexy name at all. But he came up with the name. Fortunately, they did not take the logo. So I was really grateful for that. And, then we relaunched within a month. I mean, this was August 26th. I got the letter, and we launched on October 2nd, 2006.
Wow, that's incredible.
So I would say that bump, I kind of kicked it, just kicked it out of the way. And I think the lesson in that is the doors are going to slam in your face in life. People are going to hurt you and harm you. They have their own reasons for doing that. And instead of spending too much time kind of analyzing why they did it, decide what you're going to do in response. And I believed I had a good idea. I believed that my business model was strong, and it is still different than theirs. And I knew I could do it.
It's interesting. I had something similar happen to me where it was a theft of intellectual property. And as I look back on it, in a way, it's a good thing because had the business moved along further, there just would have been more at stake, and it would have been very ugly. But I think most importantly, when I look back on that, I realized that I have enormous power in that I can create. They could only steal. And if you can create, then you will always have something ahead of you.
That is a great way to think about it, Pat, because it wasn't their idea, right? So I'm an idea person. I'm a visionary. And I'm going to use that sometimes, they can only steal. And what's interesting is they still use my story on their website. They've had some things happen where the IRS did not, they lost their 501c3 status at one point and passed some bad checks at another point. And the only reason we know that is because we helped some of the same people. And one of the people we helped said, well, your check for my HOA didn't clear the bank. And we said, well, what are you talking about? And she sent us a copy of the check, and it was their check. So, those things can happen, but I've come to the point now where, they're helping people. That's great. And we're happy to help some, we don't know if we help the same people, except in that circumstance, but people need more help than we at the Pink Fund can provide. And the reality is they have to cobble together multiple resources. And so if that means getting it from another organization, we want that to happen for them.
What are your criteria for applying for financial support through cancer?
So the first thing is that the patient must be in active treatment. And for our definition of that, that would be undergoing mastectomy, chemotherapy, or radiation. It does not include the aromatase inhibitors that people can take for 5 to 10 years. So it's the treatment period in which really your side effects are so challenging that you probably cannot work. Interestingly enough, now in our COVID time, many of these women have elected not to work where they might have, gutted it out because they're immunocompromised. So we do have a fund for that as well. So if you've self-selected out of the workforce because you're fearful of contracting COVID, we'll still help you. So that's the first one. We also recently added in also that if your spouse or domestic partner has lost income and has become the caregiver or has lost income because of COVID, then you would qualify as well. So it used to be that just the patient had to have demonstrated a loss of income, whereas now it's spouse, domestic partner, or they can have a common law marriage. And then the second one is that the household income must be at or below 500% of the federal poverty level. So for a family of 4, I think it's around $127,000 at 500%. So that chart is on our website. So it's clear, you can look on there and you can say, well, there are 3 people in my family and this is the max income that we can have. And that is supported. We do require that part of our application requires the most recent tax return. So household or single tax return. And then you have to supply copies of the bills you want paid. We do need to see your treatment protocol, so your stage and grade of diagnosis, your treatment start date, projected end date, what medications you're taking, and a sign-off letter from either your treating oncologist, surgeon, or provider social worker.
Do a lot of people ask for help with insurance payments?
No, surprisingly not. Mostly, the biggest thing they want, about 57% of our dollars go to make house payments. So think about that. The worst thing even with COVID, all the support that the government has provided to forestall evictions and foreclosures is because you don't want people on the street. And that was the most fearful thing for me. Were we going to end up in a shelter or an apartment? My husband was self-employed, so I didn't even know if we could lease an apartment. We have helped people who have been living in hotels. We've helped people who are actually living in storage units.
Well, I don't think people appreciate the financial toxicity that goes with cancer treatments.
They don't understand it. They primarily think it's the medical costs, which can be, on average, the first year of treatment with breast cancer, including, I don't want to say normal chemotherapy regimen, but a medium. Chemotherapy can be, it depends how many sessions you're going to have based on the grade and stage of your tumor, but it's about $34,000 out of pocket the first year.
Wow.
So, depending on what your insurance is, you've got your insurance premium, then you have your deductibles, and then you have your co-pays. And the best thing a patient can do when they get diagnosed, if they understand, that's one of the things that patients do not understand, the cost of care, and providers do not sit down generally and discuss that with them. And that's one of the first things I think that needs to happen. Here's your prescribed treatment protocol. Let's look at what your insurance is going to cover. Maybe there's a way to optimize your insurance. And certainly with the Affordable Care Act, if somebody's lost their job, they can most often go into Medicaid now or Medicare. And so then they eliminate a lot of those medical expenses right out of the gate. So then they're just concerned about their non-medical basic cost of living expenses.
I think even for people who have a more comfortable lifestyle, the costs are astronomical. I mean, for example, my insurance premiums run $1,000 a month. I have a $7,600 deductible. They cover almost nothing. That means I spend $20,000 a year for health insurance.
Yep.
It's obscene.
It is obscene. And you don't get anything with it.
No. And it doesn't cover all those other things you need to just make your life a little more comfortable, whether it's some acupuncture or massage or whatever it might be. It's really outrageous.
Well, we have to remember that insurance companies are publicly traded corporations, even though they claim nonprofit. Some of them aren't publicly traded, but their executives are getting multi-million-dollar salaries and bonuses based on keeping their costs down. So one of the things that's so interesting to me is, standard of care and insurance companies denying treatment based on, they want you to go through step therapy, which there's some legislation now going forward to eliminate that.
Your story has so many ups and downs. If you could, looking back at it all, I mean, you've made such an incredible shift to an organization that does so much to help so many people, and you've been amazingly successful. You have a lot of corporate sponsors. You've reached many, many people. If you could rewrite your story, would you?
No. The best thing that happened to me was losing everything I thought had value and finding out what really does.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life. You can subscribe to our free podcast at www.bumpintheroad.us or become a premium member to hear the full conversation. Just go to www.bumpintheroad.us for more information and to sign up.